The title of this panel is about safe water, and that's kind of a simple four-letter word, but it means a lot. When you think about safe water, you have to think about how you minimize risks. The panel description also talks about how the culture is changing, but I'm going to talk more about how we can change the culture and how we should change the culture. Yeah. So when I think about risks and about mitigating risks, which is really a key thing that we need to do as a water company serving 5 million people, I think of it in three phases. I think of it short-term, mid-term, long-term. If I think about it in the short term, I think about quality, because you need to have excellent quality in the water that you provide to your customers on a continuous basis, and you need to mitigate risks in case anything happens, and things can happen. We see that around the world. So it's not only measuring and ensuring that the quality is at a high level, but knowing how to respond if something happens. So you need to prepare for that. On the midterm, you have to think about infrastructure and infrastructure resilience. And this is also where you start thinking about the effects of climate change. Yeah. And sometimes climate change has effects that are not just long-term, but about short-term. I've seen in the last couple of months certain issues in the United States, in other countries, where because of flooding, key infrastructure like water processing plants were damaged, and then that created significant issues downstream to their customers and so on. So also, and especially in our case, that's very critical, serving 5 million people, you need to have backup plans, you need to have secondary systems that support your primary system. And I have to say that, thank God, in Greece, we do have that in place, but it is something that one needs to keep that in mind. And just to explain what we're doing in Greece, we have the main system that brings water all the way from Western Greece, where it rains a lot, to Eastern Greece, where it doesn't rain as often. That is a huge, significant project. But again, we're talking about 300 kilometers of infrastructure that, again, there you have to look at the various risks that you may be facing and be able to respond to emergencies whenever and if they happen, and put in place your backup system so that you can turn them on whenever. The next one, and I think I can go a little bit over on time.
Yeah,
we have time, since it's only the two of us, I guess, so, or three of us.
Three of us. He's more important than me.
Right. So we'll have to figure out how we
absolutely.
put
Gotta make
beer
sure
on our
that
taps.
have to make sure that Yanis is convinced as well. Actually, I have a pretty basic question. Is your water utility, is it private or state, or both?
It's both. Now, that makes it quite interesting on the governance point of view, because 60% of it is owned by the state, 40% is listed in the Athens Stock Exchange. So in some ways it is good, because we have more governance, both state kind of governance and listed company kind of governance. In other ways, it is a little bit difficult for someone who's managing such a company to balance the two. But that's a whole different question. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later. Let me finish a little bit about the risks first. And the long-term risk, and especially when you think again about climate change, and you see what happened in Europe last year, where suddenly all the rivers went dry. Thankfully, this didn't happen in Greece, and thankfully our reservoirs are at higher levels than the 10-year average. But you never know what may happen next year or the year after. So you need to prepare for that, and you need to mitigate for those risks. So we're doing that in several ways. One is looking at the non-revenue water and trying to reduce that. That is an expensive proposition. We're actually at the average of the European Union in terms of measuring non-revenue water. and we need to get lower, but how much lower can you get? Because it costs to put the infrastructure and to make the changes to lower the non-revenue water.
Now, what exactly is it?
Is
I'm a
non-revenue
simple
water?
man. What is non-revenue water?
Water that you don't get paid for, but most of it actually is water that you lose through your pipes in your system,
Yeah.
and water that
I
you
see.
don't measure
Yeah, with you.
through your
leakage
meters.
and so on.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so especially the water that you lose in your pipes,
Yeah.
you want to minimize that so you can
Yeah.
have
Huge
more
issue in the
quantities.
UK, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually there this morning in the UK. So, so the idea here, we're doing a couple of things. One has to do with an effort to recycle wastewater to produce water for industrial uses or irrigation, and that's very important. So, for example, one of our key customers, a refinery, consumes 1% of the water that we provide. So if we can provide that refinery with recycled water, which we're aiming to do, and
Yeah.
there are more than one refineries, obviously, that means that it's like saving 1% of the water. So we're doing that, and especially with a plan that we have to build wastewater facilities in Eastern Attica. There we're going to use all the wastewater that they produce, make it clean, and basically use it for irrigation. But we have to also be ready for, in case we have issues of having the necessary supplies of water, have readiness of other ways that we can produce water around Athens, and we are preparing a plan for that. And then we have to think long term, and we need to do that with the government, for potentially looking at other areas such as desalination. And I was reading earlier today that Egypt is getting ready to create 21 new desalination plants that are going to produce about 8 million cubic meters of water every day. Just to put that in perspective, in Athens, we use about 1 million cubic meters of water every day. And it's quite interesting. I think there is a confluence of things here, because you have all in order to move forward with desalination, you need a lot of energy.
Exactly.
In Greece,
environmentally pretty unsound.
Correct. Not necessarily, because in Greece there's a great move towards renewable energy. Actually, a few months ago, all of the Greek electricity needs were taken care of just from renewable energy, and there are
So you could have desalination, which is not
correct
energy.
It will need energy, but it can use renewable energy, and that's why part of our plan is actually to move more into ourselves producing renewable energy. We're already doing that with several hydro plants that we have, and also with some photovoltaics. But let me just finish this part, just to say that when you think about water, managing the water facilities is probably the easiest part of the job. The most difficult part of the job is thinking about all the potential risks and thinking ahead of what you can do in advance in order to mitigate them, so you can really provide safe and clean water. And clean, I mean that in two ways, both in terms of quality, but also in terms of energy, to provide that to the people that you serve.